En route to my point this morning, 3 things I know. 1, we are each very alone. We come into this world alone, we each have our own journeys to experience, and when we die, we leave this world alone too, or at least this experience of it. What happens after that, I can't know. Accounts from people who have died and been brought back to life suggest that death may involve reunion with people who have died before us. Some describe the experience as seductive, irresistibly enchanting. But while near-death experiences have themes in common, in the end, death is also particular to the person experiencing it. Only you were born into your exact life. Only you can accumulate the memories and dreams and mystical experiences that constitute your sense of being. And only you will cross the threshold of your death, leaving behind what you know of yourself to show up as essence to your reunion with the source of all being. And each of us, as we go about our lives, going to the grocery store, sending emails, going to work, or walking down the street, are like containers of infinity. Our faces are like the surface of a lake in which the world can see its own reflection and occasional glimpses of movement beneath. But behind our faces, beneath the surface of the water, we contain vast interior worlds. The sound of your interior world is the steady stream of thoughts, trickling or flowing or rushing. Your interior world's landscape is made up of memory, all the images and experiences that have shaped you and that give shape to your habits of interpretation. This landscape includes the heights of your accomplishments, ecstasy and pride, and the low, darkened places of your disappointment, sadness, and shame. Your interior world is populated by all the people you've ever known, and some you have only heard about. They come to mind according to this or that prompt from the outside world, a familiar face or other memory trigger, or when your stream of thoughts wanders close to their location in your mind. And the atmosphere of your interior world consists of your imagination. Your imagination permeates everything within it and makes it possible for you to travel anywhere at all in your mind, even if your body stays put. The geography is constantly shifting and changing. And we can't know each other's interior worlds. I don't even know my children's interior worlds, and I brought them into this outer world. In this way, a great deal of our lives is private to ourselves. Because so much of the experience of being is intensely private, our spirits seek solitude. Even the tremendously extroverted, like me, need regular time alone. I was a stay-at-home mom when my children were very little, and they were of the age that they chattered away constantly, asking questions and giving commentary on everything around us. I remember so well a day when I went to the grocery store and sitting at a stoplight on the way home, I noticed that I was having an uninterrupted stream of thought for the first time in what felt like ages. One thought was just leading to another, and nobody was stopping them to ask me for peanut butter and jelly rice cakes. That's what we were into back then. Everyone needs solitude. I even remember the kids getting lost in their own thoughts when they were 2 or 3 years old, and I'd come in and I'd see their little shoulders hunched over some toy or activity, and they'd be humming absent-mindedly. That was the best. The Rabbi Eliezer Shor says that solitude is time devoted to the vertical relationship with the divine, where all that is distracting falls away. That may be a good theological metaphor for some of us. Others may think of solitude as connecting with the light or the wisdom within. He also says that in community we receive our name, while in solitude we nurture that part of ourselves that has no name. In community, we receive our name, and in solitude, we nurture that part of ourselves that has no name. And Shore describes the natural tendency to yearn for community when we are alone and to yearn for solitude when we are with others. We need both, solitude and community. This brings me to the second thing I know. Number 2, we aren't as alone as I just said. When I was in divinity school in the Boston area, there was a local radio station that played this quirky combination of musical styles, everything from indie artists to oldies and a whole morning of show tunes. But my favorite was the Saturday afternoon all a cappella hour. Now, a cappella groups have a penchant for the kind of music my husband likes, and which I tease him relentlessly for. A lot of 80s pop. Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics. Thriller. Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go. It was usually college groups singing. They compete against each other. The Harvard Radcliffe Baritones, the University of Massachusetts Doo-Wop Shop, and my favorite, MIT's group, the Logarithms. It's so nerdy and cool. It might not have been my usual musical taste, but somehow, they always made me cry. What I loved most about the a cappella hour was knowing that while I was working in the city at Brigham and Women's Hospital as a chaplaincy intern, seeing people in all states of sickness, healing, death, and sorrow, and wondering about our situation in the universe, there were groups of people getting together and finding the best way to blend their voices into something richer than they could do alone. They were getting together just to make beauty in the world. Even when I thought the music was a little cheesy, I loved that. It moved me. And it made sitting by the side of a young person in the last moments of their life or praying with the family of a patient in the ER seem much more doable. In fact, in the face of what looks like so much suffering in the world, being by the sides of others began to feel a little bit like singing a cappella. There was beauty and comfort in being together, and the patients and the chaplains both noticed it. Likewise, when I'm with you on these Sunday mornings, while we tackle serious themes and the work that needs to be done to make this world a more just and compassionate place, I look at the poetry and the music and the variety of people participating in our worship services, and I see that we are also blending our voices and making beauty for beauty's sake. At the same time, we try to take life by the horns. We need that. We need solitude, and we need to be in the company of others. A Unitarian Universalist faith is not a trickle-down faith. It doesn't start at the top, up in heaven, and come down to us as a set of orders and creeds and stories through a chain of command. It starts with the self. But it doesn't mean that we can stop at the individual level. In this church, the individual is the ultimate authority on religious belief, but Unitarian Universalism is an expansive faith. It begins with the individual, and it expands out into religious community. There, it becomes richer than it would have been alone, both in content and in the way it transforms into action. How does it do that? First, the content. The radical Catholic priest Richard Rohr says that most people don't see things as they are. They see things as they are. They don't see things as they are. They see things as they are. In this theologically diverse community, we hear a variety of language and imagery. You might hear Buddhist or Hindu philosophy one day and a story from the Bible the next. As one of your ministers, I'm as likely to draw from a scientific source as I am from poetry or art. And hearing all of these things, it becomes much less likely that any one of us will begin to worship a God or ultimate reality that looks a little bit too much like us. Also, because we come from a variety of backgrounds, In talking with each other, we began to catch on to our own assumptions about the world. It makes us wiser, spiritual people. And how about the way our faith is transformed into action? Richard Rohr also complains, he's a Catholic priest now, that hearing confession is like being stoned to death with marshmallows. That's how he put it. People avoid real evil, he says, like systemic injustice, and instead they confess to missing church. Religion is participation, he said, not attendance. Together we can accomplish so much more than we do alone. For example, here in the Albuquerque congregation, we've created an ESL program, a food pantry, and an immigration justice project, programs that help a lot of people and couldn't have been done by anyone alone. And now, the immigration project has strengthened the ESL program, and the ESL program has started sharing its clothing exchange with the food pantry. So the groups are helping each other out. They come together as part of a larger group, this church, and each enhances the other. Our branch congregations in Carlsbad and the East Mountains and in Socorro also take on projects, and sometimes they come together to commiserate and learn from each other. Synergy. Which brings me to the third thing I know. Number 3, just as people need groups, groups need each other. It's a sermon of nesting dolls this morning: self, church community, larger denomination. A UU faith is expansive. It begins with the self, expands into the church community, and that church community reaches out to others to form an even bigger one. Instead of trickling down, it spreads out. That's what I mean by the larger faith. Instead of the wider denomination determining what this church will be like and what you should believe, we determine what the wider denomination will be like and how it will speak to the world. Just attending services here at First Unitarian, you might not realize that we are one of about 1,049 congregations, organized in North America into 19 districts that make up the Unitarian Universalist Association, or the UUA. This church belongs to the Mountain Desert District, which consists of a wee bit of land stretching from Mexico to Canada and encompassing the Rocky Mountains, the king-size district. The headquarters for all of the districts is located in Boston, just a few miles from where I studied for the ministry. It's made up of a few tall brick buildings located right next door, and I mean right next door, to the Massachusetts Capitol building, overlooking Boston Common. The UUA is founded on the idea that we're better together. It was formed when the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America merged in 1961, hence the name Unitarian Universalist. Before they merged, both of those denominations believed in an expansive faith, much as I'm describing to you this morning. They practiced it by governing themselves according to congregational polity, which means no pope. These churches were autonomous. They called their own ministers and made their own rules and raised their own money, just like we do here. According to this way of governing, there's no higher authority in church matters than the congregation. We still practice that today. But these churches didn't just have a vision of no institutional hierarchy. They had a vision of mutual support and cooperation, of congregations enhancing each other spiritually and practically in all their diversity by working together. And so they formed an association, which is now the UUA, through which they could realize that vision. Inside the UUA headquarters in Boston is the denomination's president, Peter Morales. Many of you met him last spring when he came and preached here one evening to help us launch that immigration justice project. He has a staff that oversees programming and health of the denomination. Some of the people on staff are district executives, like Nancy Bowen. She works for our district, and her job is to get to know the churches here, from Mexico to Canada, along the Rockies, and to support them as needed. Sometimes that means giving honest feedback and guidance to help a church through a time of conflict. When the waters get choppy, it's nice to have a guide, right? And other times, Nancy does trainings, like providing a workshop for a new board. She's done that for us here. And district executives are also very useful for ministers who are considering coming into the district. Nancy is one of the people I called when I was wondering whether I might like to move to Albuquerque and become a minister of this church. And when I asked her about this place, she said, "Your ministers work very hard, but that it's a wonderful, healthy congregation." And she was right on both counts, and I'm glad I said yes. Other staff members at the UUA ensure that we have annual general assemblies. I'll come back to those in just a minute. And they support religious education programs and oversee the fellowshipping and hiring of ministers. When I was trying to become a minister, I had to show up for a couple of really big interviews, the kind where a panel of people read through your file and really grill you with questions at the UUA. There was a lot more to it than that, too. I had to get a graduate degree and do 2 kinds of internships and write many, many essays and get letters of recommendation and even pass a 2-day psychological evaluation. They want people who are just crazy enough to go into the ministry and not one bit crazier. All of those requirements are another example of the way the UUA helps churches by providing some standards by which to evaluate clergy. Only a congregation can ordain someone. The UUA does not do that. And congregations are free, actually, to ordain anyone they want. But they tend to choose only people whom the UUA has vetted and accepted into fellowship. Once a congregation has ordained a fellowshipped minister, other congregations usually also accept that person's ordination. And because of the shared standards, we don't have to start from scratch every time. Now, in return for all those benefits and many more, churches make financial contributions to the UUA each year. We do that, and it's based on the number of church members. And we try to say yes when called upon to support other churches or more programming in the denomination. Last November, for example, I traveled to Boston to speak at the UUA about our immigration project for Peter Morales and a group of other leaders. And in February, Christine participated in a think tank in Florida about the future of our denomination. And also under the umbrella of the UUA is our denominational board of directors. They are elected by congregations to lead in between general assemblies. General assemblies, which we call GAs for short. A GA is a very large meeting of UUs representing congregations from all across the US, Canada, and a sprinkling of other countries. It's where we get together to do all of the electing, deciding, supporting, and combining every year in June. And they're a pretty unique experience with anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 UUs in one place. A lot more tie-dye than you would imagine. Their delegates who've been sent by their congregations get to vote on the business of our denomination, who will be on the board, who will be president, what stands we'll take as a denomination on issues of justice or morality, what priorities will guide our use of resources. There's usually a public demonstration or a march of some kind. With so many of us gathered together, we can make a big impact that way. And there are workshops and lectures to help us deepen in faith and return home to our congregations with new information and skills. Congregations that are spread out everywhere. If you take a trip or a vacation this summer, see if there's a UU church there. One of the ways we benefit from each other is by seeing how other people do things. So check them out and let us know what you learned. And if you're looking for a trip to take, consider going to GA. As it turns out, this particular year is very unusual. Instead of being broadly about the business of the denomination, this GA has one huge focus: immigration justice. It began in 2010 when Arizona enacted its horrible SB 1070 law, legalizing racial profiling and encouraging the persecution of immigrants when little effort was being made to fix the larger problems. UUs at our General Assembly that year realized that in 2 years, in 2012, they were scheduled to be in Arizona, in Phoenix, and they were strongly considering a boycott. No one liked the idea of supporting a state that was behaving so badly, and no one liked the idea that UUs like my husband, who's a Colombian immigrant, could be targeted and harassed. If he were pulled over by police in Arizona and didn't have proof of citizenship on him, he could be detained. Can you imagine? I don't carry proof of citizenship. The choice was whether to boycott Arizona and send a message with our absence, or show up and try to send a message of support for immigrants and for reform with our presence. After a long debate, and after consulting with our churches and other organizations on the ground in Arizona, after listening to groups representing Hispanic and Latino UUs and their allies, the General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to go forward with a GA in Phoenix, but with that string attached. Instead of conducting business as usual, it would have to be a justice GA. It would have to make a bold statement and equip UUs to do even better social justice work at home. As of today, we have about 30 people going from this congregation to Phoenix. Because of its special focus, this GA is the culmination of our year dedicated to learning and action on immigration justice. We've worked to educate ourselves personally, to act locally. We've formed good partnerships with other organizations in New Mexico, and we've spoken at the state level by lobbying legislators. GA is a chance to join in making our voices heard at the national level. It's not too late to register if you'd like to go, and we'll be helping to arrange carpools and maybe even a bus if we get enough riders. However, the board is appointing delegates this week, so if you think you might want to go and be a voting delegate rather than just participating in everything else, and you haven't talked to me yet, be sure you do it today. We've moved from the oneness of the individual to the oneness of the church community, where we come together to make beauty and tackle the woes of the world, to the oneness of the denomination, where churches support each other. So it seems fitting to close by asking you to join me in putting your voices together for our closing hymn.